The word curse feels familiar because most of us have heard it throughout our lives. But familiarity should never be confused with certainty. Before accepting any word as universal truth, ask yourself a simple question. Where does a curse exist in observable reality? Can anyone point to one the same way they can point to the sun, a tree, water, fire, or a mountain? Can it be measured, photographed, weighed, or demonstrated independently of human belief? If the answer is no, then we are no longer discussing something that physically exists in nature. We are discussing an abstract human concept. This distinction is important because translation works best when people are describing the same observable reality. A tree remains a tree, regardless of whether someone calls it by an English, Hebrew, Greek, Spanish, Chinese, or Swahili name, because everyone can point to the same object. Reality remains unchanged, while languages simply assign different sounds to describe it. Abstract ideas are completely different because they cannot be pointed to in nature. The English word curse is not a physical object, but an English interpretation chosen to represent several different ideas found in ancient languages. In the Hebrew text, the word arar carries ideas such as placing someone under judgment, invoking misfortune, removing favor or protection, binding someone to negative consequences, or declaring someone outside blessing. Notice that none of these meanings necessarily describe what many modern people imagine when they hear the word curse. When Genesis says the ground was cursed, the Hebrew text does not necessarily describe someone casting a magical spell upon the soil. Rather, it describes the ground existing under conditions where hardship and difficulty now accompany human labor. Another Hebrew word, kalal, is also translated as curse in certain passages, yet its primary meanings are to dishonor, to despise, to treat with contempt, or to make light of someone. These are different concepts, yet English often combines them beneath one familiar word. In the Greek text, the word katara describes an invoked condemnation, a spoken judgment, or a formal denunciation directed against someone, while the related Greek verb kataraomai means to speak against someone, to call down judgment, or to denounce them. These meanings overlap with the Hebrew in some places, yet they remain products of a different language and a different culture. Now notice what happened during translation. Hebrew presented ideas involving judgment, dishonor, contempt, withdrawn favor, and negative consequences. Greek presented ideas involving spoken condemnation, formal denunciation, and verbal judgment. English gathered these different concepts beneath one single word, curse. Yet when many modern English speakers hear that word, they immediately imagine witches, black magic, supernatural hexes, invisible mystical forces, or demonic powers. Those ideas are largely products of later cultural development and are not necessarily what an ancient Hebrew or Greek audience understood. This reveals one of the greatest challenges in translation. When translators encounter something observable like water, the moon, a bird, or a mountain, everyone can point to the same reality. Translation simply exchanges one sound for another, while reality remains unchanged. But no one can physically point to judgment. No one can physically point to holiness. No one can physically point to righteousness. No one can physically point to grace. No one can physically point to sin. No one can physically point to a curse. These ideas exist within cultures, philosophies, legal systems, religions, and shared human understanding rather than observable reality itself. Therefore, when translators move these ideas into another language, they are not transferring reality. They are transferring one culture's explanation into another culture's explanation. They choose the closest available expression, but no translator can scientifically demonstrate that two different cultures understand an invisible concept in exactly the same way. This is not a criticism of translation. It is simply recognizing its limits. Translation works remarkably well when reality itself can be observed, but it becomes far more uncertain when discussing concepts that cannot be demonstrated in nature. Perhaps the deeper question is not whether sacred texts can be translated. The deeper question is this: if a curse cannot be pointed to anywhere in observable reality, how can anyone prove that one culture's invisible understanding is exactly the same as another culture's invisible understanding? Language is one of humanity's greatest tools, but words are not reality. They are symbols pointing toward understanding, and every abstract translation deserves to be examined before it is accepted as universal truth. Ashe.